Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Illinois Green Party series. I am your host, David Rich, with my co-host, Calvin Tomashko. Calvin, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm really curious and excited to learn tonight, so this is going to be a good one.
This is a really good one, and I found out kind of like just last minute a couple days ago as I was doing research on it. We have our guest, Dan Tweed. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, David and Calvin.
That's right. Dan is the founder of PermaTrail Project.
The PermaTrail Project or Planet Permatrail, or I'm always changing, tweaking the name, but right now,
very cool.
Permatrail.org if you want to see
PermaTrail.org if you'd like to go online and check it out. It's an organization founded by you some time ago. Why don't you go ahead and just catch us up on the history of it from its inception till now?
Well, I'm a baby boomer. I was born in 1960, so getting a little long in the tooth, but I had a pretty amazing childhood because my parents stuck me in with my older brother, who was 4 years older, Paul, and he was kind of a semi-autistic but kind of genius guy, and I think as punishment for having to share his room with a 1-year-old, just out of diapers kid, he decided that we could talk about anything like science fiction or anything I wanted to talk about. Actually managed to get me skipped a grade ahead, I think, in reading level, because he was. So I think there were like 3 really influential books. One was Arthur C. Clarke's Profiles of the Future, which came out in 1962, I believe, and Marshall McLuhan's The Mechanical Bride, which was sort of a story about how humans and their advertising relates, and then Utopia or Oblivion from Buckminster Fuller, Prospects for Humanity. So those were like really formative and discussions, and we're both like huge science fiction lovers, and I think we had this kind of civilization must survive kind of ethic that was kind of instilled. In fact, he was working on a big science fiction epic called The Movie Time that had all these characters he didn't really invent, but he wanted to put them all together in the same science fiction universe. And so he would get me to talk about that. And he had a fictional company called Pacificatron, and I had one called Detronics, and we were always like who was going to have the better company with more futuristic stuff, and so it was just a great childhood to become aware of like global level ideas and the ecology and the future, and so I've always ever since I was a kid I've been like thinking about these big existential biosphere civilization level questions, and that has sort of got me into doing a hemp movement show on UC Irvine's college radio show. I did a show for 7 years there called Radio Free Hemp, where I got to talk to the movers and shakers in the hemp movement. And it was the industrial, hemp, not so much the recreational side, because that still kind of had the Cheech and Chong stigma. And it's like, oh, you just want to get it legalized. So you're all stoners, you want to get high, right? And like, no, it could save the world as a food fuel.
Well, I would have said, yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, right. I know. Yeah, it's like, dude, like what you're selling out, you should be talking about,
It's also good as an oil, a lubricant, and a rope and cloth making material. But at the end of the day, I'd like to be stoned. Thank you, though.
Yeah. And the endocannabinoid system is just amazingly goes back, apparently in evolution, like hundreds of thousands of years. Like all these other animals have receptors for it, and so I got to be involved after that with a magazine called Psychedelic Illuminations, and we put out like 8 issues. It was supposed to be a quarterly, but it ended up more being like an annual. But I got to meet like Terrence McKenna, and we did a festival with Tim Leary. I got to like record, John Lilly, and I got to give Allen Ginsberg a ride to Malibu and hang out with him.
No way! That's awesome.
I've had this really storied, pure privileged, baby boomer life, But what bothers me is the baby boomers are kind of seen as this generation that was hedonistic, and they kind of blew it. They just wanted to party, and what have they done for the world other than become yuppies and screw up the world. So, part of me wants to create a permaculture interconnected trail project, which would be the PermaTrail Project, as kind of a monument to say, hey, look, the baby boomers weren't all that bad. There's this guy that was a baby boomer, and he had this concept for this big open source project, to connect all the trails and permaculture installations, and in doing so kind of save civilization and the biosphere and make us a multiplanetary species, although that doesn't always go over too great with the permaculture crowd. But ask any dinosaur, if they would have liked to have been multiplanetary when the
I'm gonna definitely do that.
The mass extinction asteroid hit. So we are in overshoot right now. We're using, I think, if everyone in the world lived the American standard of living, we would need something like 4.8 planets to sustain that. As it is now, I think we're already in like a 2-planet overshoot, but it's the trends are going the wrong way. Just recycling and driving less and planting a tree, that's probably not going to cut it. We need to do really radical fixes in the regenerative sector really quick. And I think if you haven't learned about permaculture, that would be a great start. I know you said you have a couple of permaculture certifications.
Well, I have 2 certifications. One's in horticulture, specifically organic farming and gardening, and the other one is in permaculture. Yes. So our teacher, Karen Whites, made sure that we all got certified in permaculture as well, because that was kind of her thing. Permaculture is a fascinating area of study and application. And basically, well, here, why don't you tell us what permaculture is?
Well, it's kind of one of those mashup words. Permanent agriculture is sometimes what it's, but permanent culture. But it was a couple of Australians, Bill Mollison and David Holmgren, that sort of put these principles together, probably from older sources. You can say the Indigenous people were actually practicing permaculture with their so-called. They weren't just hunter-gathering randomly. They would hunter-gather in such a way that they were making, let's just let them run the national parks or something. That would be a pretty cool start. And I take care of an elder who's actually half Choctaw, and they're an amazing tribe, because they were victimized by the Trail of Tears, another trail, but this is a much worse one.
Yeah, that's a bad trail, right?
Yeah, under Andrew Jackson, if people don't know, they were relocated from their original homeland, which was usually around Arkansas, Louisiana area. They had to basically walk, to the Oklahoma, the Indian Territory, before that got stolen. And hey, looks like a great place for a land grab, So, but the Irish actually heard about the Trail of Tears, and or it was the other way around. The Choctaw heard about the potato famine, and they sent a collection. They took up a collection for the starving Irish, and the Irish were so impressed. They built this amazing memorial to the Choctaw that you can see. It's like this huge metallic semicircle of feathers. So there's this great connection there, and there's First Nations people all over the world. I mean. I guess it's really a question of when settler colonialism, kicked in. The book that I think really expresses it is the book Ishmael. You might have heard of that book. The taker versus the leaver mindset, and so I think that's why we're in this condition of planetary overshoot, because we've lost the lever. Leave it behind mindset. Now we're in full taker mode. It's so I don't take it, someone else will. So so that mentality has to be healed, addressed, changed around, and hopefully a project like a global project like the PermaTrail Project, because I think someone observed. I heard this on the radio. I think it was back in the 90s, that there was about 50,000 miles of trails in the world, and if that length were just doubled, you would have an interconnected worldwide trail system. And I don't know if we're always adding to the trail network here in Thousand Oaks, where I'm near. They just created a great backbone trail in the Santa Monica Mountains. And now I think you can hike actually from like Malibu all the way to Port Hueneme. It's like a 70-mile trail that sucks up all these other trails, and there's no overnight camping on it though, or what's called dispersed camping. And I think that's something that needs to be part of the PermaTrail project, is the freedom to roam. There's something called the free camping movement, or I think in Australia they call it the Queen's Rights. It's like anywhere within 100 feet of a waterway, you can basically do dispersed camping if you're respectful and you're picking up after yourself and you're not bothering any of the existing property owners. Scandinavian lands have a huge movement like this, where it's a freedom to roam, free camping. There's a long Scandinavian word for it, but I think that is going to be a fundamental part of the PermaTrail project too. And just down the road from me, we've got a pretty legendary permaculture installation, Apricot Lane Farms. They actually show up at the farmers market here every Thursday in Thousand Oaks, and they've been featured. There's a film about them called "The Biggest Little Farm," and I think Oprah
I've seen that.
Oh yeah.
So, great documentary. Oh, fantastic.
So yeah, they have some great practices there that I think they get all their fertilizer from a big worm compost, and they basically use the leachate. They run water through the worm bit, and that worm tea is just some of the best plant food.
Compost tea?
Yeah. So that's going to be a big part of it. If you go on Wikipedia and just they've got a list under permaculture installations. I think it's like 1,000 worldwide, listing there. So at some point, PermaTrail Project is going to be trying to aggregate all this information using what's called GIS software, which is Geospatial Information Systems. And if you remember, maybe textbooks used to have these clear overlays that you could like say you had the human body. It's like, hey, here's what the nervous system and the muscles look like. So imagine that is being done digitally, and you can have as many overlays as you want, and they're all selectable and modifiable. And if you don't want to use a commercial version like Esri has their ArcGIS, there's something called QGIS, which is the open source version, which I'm probably going to be promoting as part of the PermaTrail. But yeah, there's a great GIS professional named Melissa. That's she does a lot of work in Canada with earth-oriented resources and Indigenous resources. And in fact, her company Esri has a whole unit that does nothing but tribal and Indigenous GIS work.
Nice.
So that's going to be really a big. So it's kind of this constellation of partnerships that I see kind of coalescing, not just permaculture, not just GIS, but actually economic equality systems. Like I'm a big fan of what's called Georgism. There was a guy named Henry George who back in the 1800s, in his book Progress and Poverty, The Real Cause of Inequality, he actually used the term spaceship Earth, 100 years before Bucky Fuller said. So, and then there's a friend of mine who's actually got a business plan, which kind of uses Georgist principles. And this is a way to create a libertarian society without coercion or electoral politics. It's a very detailed plan, and it just really involves intentional communities buying up land and then working with this format that's kind of like a Georgist format, where you basically get a universal basic income based on the resources of nature and having them be administered by the community at kind of market annual market auction kinds of pricing. So it doesn't entirely throw away property or capitalism. It kind of takes the best of both worlds of capitalist and socialist ideas and kind of melts them together, which I think it's definitely worth a look. Just Google Geoism or Georgism. And at one time, he was like the most widely read author, second only to the Bible, I think. And 100,000 people came to his funeral, and he
Wow.
came for mayor of New York. And but no, one of his students even made this game called the Landlord's Game to promote his ideas, and it promptly got twisted around into what we now call the Monopoly game. So it's like it's funny. The original
Really?
Yeah, it was actually to teach Georgist principles, and it got totally turned around. So amazing
Clearly.
how the memory hole works,
Wow.
But another idea is what I think is soft power economics. If we gave discounts, voluntarily gave discounts to people who did not own land, that would be a way of re-empowering, the inequality for people that, or you can do this with, let's say you give people that make less money, they get a sliding scale price tag, so they get a price based on a percentage of their annual income. So, let's say a merchant agrees to price something at 5 minutes of your time. So a rich person who makes $200 an hour, he's going to pay. I should have chosen a better math example, but let's say a guy who's making $10 an hour, so the price for him is going to be 1/6 of $10, so for the item. But the rich guy that's making $200 an hour, it's going to be 1/6 of $200. But actually, they've done systems like this, like with toll roads, and you actually get more profit from instituting a sliding equality scale price tag. So there's a friend of mine in San Francisco, and he's worked all this stuff out. He calls it Hope Coin, hours equals price coin, and he's done an amazing amount of writing about it. It's a little hard to read. He uses all these different sizes and colors, and he writes about it. But what I call it is Cuponomics, quality, progress, opportunity, networking, economics. And I actually am developing a website I have called qpon.info and qpon.life. So I'm going to be rolling out ways that people can give each other discounts based on soft power relationships that they are in favor of. Time banks are another great thing. You could really say that time is the resource that we all share equally. I mean, every mammal gets about 4 billion heartbeats, whether you're a mouse or a monkey or a human. So really, our time is all equally, precious. And there are these time bank systems where people just trade hour for hour, one skill of dog walking for one hour of oil changing, or whatever the skill is. And, this is kind of a part of PermaTrail, would be block by block, kind of a neighborocracy, small collections. That's another there's a free book about it called Neighborocracy, and that's basically these 30 household groups, which actually works out to about 120 people if you consider about 4 people per household, which also works out to be something called Dunbar's number, which they say is like a cognitive limit on the number of people you can kind of reasonably say barge in at a bar, uninvited. If you saw them, you'd feel like you knew them well enough to just sit down and start up.
Right. Right.
So, that's kind of gets back to the intentional community movement. Right now, we're in a very ad hoc kind of array of unintentional or semi-intentional communities, and people generally don't know their neighbors very well, and they don't know what they would do if their neighborhood were hit with some contingency situation where people needed rescuing and stuff. Which kind of brings me to another thing I'm waving the flag for is Cert and Ham Radio. I'm a amateur radio person. It's a great skill when communications have gone down. There's about 3 million people around the world that have the off-grid kinds of radios, and you don't have to know Morse code anymore. It's pretty easy to pass the basic entry-level test. And,
that's really interesting, because I just recently, sorry to cut you off, but I just recently had a conversation about ham radio versus the internet. Because like I was fascinated by ham radio for a long time, just never really followed through with getting into it. And then all of a sudden, poof, Facebook shows up, and now I can talk to anybody all over the world. So I said, well, I don't need to bother with ham radio anymore. I can just, go on Facebook and talk to somebody in Kuwait or Africa or Australia or wherever the hell I want. But you're actually making a very good point. But if the grid goes down, which one day it's going to, at least temporarily, if not permanently, ham radio is a nice default deference to have so that you can still communicate with people. Can you talk a little bit just about, seriously, very briefly, because I want to get on more onto the permaculture thing.
Okay.
But can you talk about what it would take for somebody to get involved in ham radio?
Yeah, there's usually a club, in every county level, and you can go online and study for the test. It's the multiple choice test. I think it's like 100 questions, and then when you've practiced enough, and you can actually see the actual questions they're going to use from the pool, but they're going to pick random the test you get. So there's a little bit of skill involved. I actually memorized my way all the way up to extra class, which is the highest privilege level. I didn't think I was going to pass, but I studied for it and crammed and just barely got the highest privilege.
Do you have to be licensed or tested in order to use a ham radio? Because I know you can buy one off of Amazon. Yeah.
Now, in an emergency, you're allowed to do anything you need to do to communicate. But yeah, if you start going on the air and just treating it like a CB radio, it's a pretty self-policing hobby. So people are going to say, hey, you should get your call sign. You're not really doing this right.
Okay.
But yeah, it's like $10 or $15 a fee to get tested, and there's usually a test going on every few weeks somewhere. People are called volunteer examiners, and they'll administer the test. I think you could take it over the internet now with COVID. I'm not positive on that, but yeah, there's tons of resources on ham radio online, and it doesn't just take a disaster. The cell towers can become overloaded just from too many requests to make a call coming in. They'll just go offline from that. So sure. Someone sees an accident on the freeway and suddenly there's 100 people trying to make a call. That'll blow up the cell towers temporarily. Yeah, there's all kinds of fun reasons.
All right, cool. So just Google how to get into ham radio. Very cool. All right.
And
sorry, go ahead.
Keep going.
I'm kind of a fan of something that's kind of ham radio-like called Esperanto, which is a universal auxiliary language that was invented by a Polish optometrist about the turn of the century. It was designed to be real easy to learn. And actually, if you learn Esperanto, it makes any other language 40% easier to learn. And the great thing about it is if you're a native speaker of one language and you know Esperanto, then that's a perfect bridge to translate something to another similar bilingual speaker from another language.
Yeah, Esperanto is very cool, and it's something like I was assuming you played Dungeons and Dragons back in the day.
I started to, but I thought
right,
I don't have the choice just to stay on the surface. So I have to go in the dungeon.
in any of the worlds in D&D, there was always a language called Common Language, which just was an easier way for the trolls and the elves and the humans to be able to talk to each other. Esperanto, okay. That was actually the idea, not necessarily inspired by D&D, but the idea behind Esperanto was to give the world one universal language to speak. We're forcing English upon everybody, whether it be through commerce or politics.
Well,
or
if you want to be a pilot, that's the universal language of aviation.
Yeah, exactly. But as far as I understand, that was the idea behind Esperanto. I merely looked at Esperanto online, and yeah, it seems like it's a very easily accessible language. It's supposed to be super easy to learn and understand and speak and that kind of thing. It takes the better, easier parts of a lot of different languages and puts them together. It's very, very, very clever on this man's part for sure.
Yeah, like if it ends in an O, it's a noun. Right. If it ends in an A, it's an adjective. That's just one little
that kind of stuff.
rule.
Yes.
Oh
Very cool.
my goodness. This is so much cool stuff. I'm blown away by it. I wanted to respond to a few things that you touched on. One, I think it's really great to recognize that Indigenous people, nations and tribes had plenty of these practices, and it's only wisdom to finally like go back and learn from them and push permaculture further. I think that's great. We mentioned GIS, and we actually had somebody who I think was an expert in GIS, and that was back on episode 14 with Dr. Charla M. Burnett that we had on. So for our listeners, go back and watch that one if you're curious about GIS. And then I wanted to say that I appreciate that you're fighting for the image or the prowess of the boomer generation. I think that's really great. I encourage people not to say boomer, but to just verbalize what they mean. They mean like corporatists who are usually at least a little bit racist and are just want their own front lawn or something. I don't like people putting down a whole generation, because there's plenty of people that are working class, that have working class consciousness, and they have plenty of solidarity. And I don't think we should be shooting down a whole generation ever. I think we should be more specific in our critiques. So just awesome stuff. But I want to get to the PermaTrail, if I may. What exactly is that? We touched on how if we increase the number of trails, they could all be connected. What is that PermaTrail, or is PermaTrail more related to permaculture? Or can you go into the thesis of PermaTrail for me?
Yeah, I think it's kind of helps to look at it as kind of a spontaneous order conceptual art installation. And that right. It may not exist, as we physically connect all the trails, but if we have the amenities of knowing, where the permaculture compost toilets and drinking fountains and bike paths and overnight, camping possibilities and human rights observers and or I like to say humane rights. Actually, I think it's time to update human rights to include all the biosphere, which is the humane thing to do. So in a way, I think of PermaTrail as a shared, human way to update human rights into humane rights, and to do it in a fun, gamified kind of way. I had a friend that recently went to Spain, and he hiked one of the world's longer trails, the San Juan de Compostela Trail. They call it the Pilgrim Trail. It kind of goes at the base of the Pyrenees, and it was so that pilgrims would hike to get to Rome, I guess. And he said that was just like a great experience. There was like low cost hostels, and there was like barrels of wine. You could fill your Bota bag with. And there was food, grapes, and citrus. You could help yourself along the trail. And I think if there is something that already exists that's kind of a vision for how the PermaTrail could be, check out the Pilgrim Trail in Spain, because my friend Ed went there and just he wanted to invite me, but the wallet, and I kind of have a bum knee that I think wouldn't survive the long hike segments. But I think camp in my driveway, the woofing movement, where what's it called, work on organic farms. There's a directory of you can travel from farm to farm and stay in exchange for work. Just couch surfing, park in my driveway. I think 3D printing, like backyard, little auxiliary dwelling units is going to be a huge boon. And then people getting out of their cars and onto, more gentle transportation, even e-bikes or regular bikes that have electrical cargo trailers that push them along. There was a company in Colorado used to make a thing called Ride Kick that would change any bike into a powered, non-polluting bike. And then, we really need to half wild the earth. I think there's a half wild movement, which, because right now 95% of the mammals on Earth are humans and their livestock. All the other mammals is just and that's happened in my lifetime. We've lost 50% of the species diversity, while we've more than doubled the human population. When I was born, it was like 3 billion humans. Now we're pushing 8 billion, and we were undergoing a mass extinction. So, we've done radical things to the biosphere, and it's going to take radical moonshot level ideas to reverse and regenerate the problems. Did that sort of address what was the question? I forgot.
What is, I'm getting the general idea, and I like that you're saying it's concept art. It's really a big culmination of smaller groups moving together in one movement. What are the major selling points of this effort? What do you think is going to happen in people's material lives, and how will society benefit? Not that you have to sell people on stuff. It all sounds great, but just to put it into words, what do you think will, when everybody has these permatrails and these different practices, and we're all connected in that way, and we've left most of our vehicles, and we all practice it in mass, then where are we? What have we gained?
Oh, I think we're going to find a huge reconnection to our humaneness by getting reconnected to nature, which I think is responsible for most of the, alienation and all the ails of modernity, and the isolation and alienation and depression. It's mostly a function of we've fallen out of nature, and Terence McKenna talked about this a lot, that, the last sane moment was probably before the invention of agriculture, when we still had partnership society. It wasn't a dominator-based culture, because as soon as you get agriculture, now you need grain silos, and now you got to protect the grain silos, and you need standing armies, and now you have to have this intense system of record keeping, and all these dehumanizing factors that I'm not saying all things about modernity and agriculture are terrible, but it seems we went overboard a little too much. So I think we would find ourselves, living much more satisfied lives if we, knew our neighbors, and we weren't having food that traveled 1,500 miles to get to our plate. The average American's, plate is like, you're looking at that many food miles. I mean, that's ridiculous. We're not doing agriculture intelligently. We're doing it basically the way it was done, 200 years ago, but with micro farms, vertical farming, aeroponics, hydroponics. We could create food security webs that are just off the charts, and it'd be a lot more fun. The same with microgrids, our energy grids. If we not just connected the trails of the world, but Bucky Fuller said if our energy grid was a globally connected grid, we could balance the day-night side, load surplus and load excess, the need on one side. Those two could be balanced out from day to night side, and we could have a global currency based on the kilowatt hour, which would be a logical, standard of work. There's a professor in Santa Cruz, Robert Staten. He has a project called solardividends.org, and it's a 70-year plan to basically create a universal basic income for everyone on Earth based on solar power. And he has that outlined, very detailed plan. And there's solar coin. There's a cryptocurrency that actually you mint by gathering a megawatt hour of solar electricity, and that's another. I consider that part of the permatrail too. So I'm going to be partnering with all these groups like the Global Electric Grid, the Solar Coin, Solar Dividends, the Half Wild movement. There's a group called the Lifeboat Foundation actually that looks at these existential level threats to humanity that governments, frankly, are clueless about. And that's why I actually ran for city council in 2018 and 2020 and plan to run again in 2022. I basically got 2,000 votes in 2018, 4,000 in 2020. I'm looking to double that to 8,000 in 2022. And if it keeps doubling by 2026, I should be elected on the council. And that's with money. That's with basically just with ideas. I don't want to run based on fundraising. I want to run on the strength of good ideas. And a friend of mine has announced he's going to run for president in the transhumanist party with an artificial intelligent running mate. So this is going to be like a really, he says it's a stress test for the system, but he's going to announce his cabinet members in advance. But every politician should have a digital twin that has all the information they're dealing with, that's open source and able to be accessed by the public. And I'm going to do the same thing with my 2022 candidacy. Actually, I have actually an acronym. Dan Tweed is Distributed Autonomous Network for Topological Watershed Exploration and Display Technology. Because I want to do watershed by watershed. I think we need to do watershed-based permaculture. Typically permacultures are designed at the household lot level, but there are people. Kevin Scott Polk is actually a city level permaculture planner, and now we need watershed based permaculture.
Why don't you explain what a watershed is?
Yeah, great. When rain falls from the sky, it is essentially going to fall into a basin composed of the high points around it, and there's probably like a river or an ocean. So basically, that drainage basin is what we call a watershed. And that's you can look at a very large scale, like you could say, well, you got the Rocky Mountains in the U.S. and everything east of the Rockies is going to end up in the Atlantic Ocean or the Gulf of Mexico, and everything west of the Rockies is going to end up in the Pacific Ocean. But you can divide those watersheds into smaller and smaller units. I'm in the Cayugas Creek watershed, which is about, I think, 70 square miles. It's a pretty good chunk of, maybe it's like 1/6 of Ventura County. But yeah, finding out your watershed and finding out whose land you're on. I'm on Chumash land here in Thousand Oaks, and another tribe, I think it's Miquanaquah. I can't really pronounce it. But there's a great app called native-land.ca, native-land.ca, and that will tell you who you need to be respecting. And then there's similar apps for your watershed. So that's a big part of PermaTrail, is learning your watershed and your native land occupation details. I guess you could call it.
Yeah, we certainly have broken most, if not all, treaties in some ways or forms, and still continue to break them today. So I really like this observation that this is occupied land. It's very astute. You had some slides that you want us to look at. Is this a good time?
Oh, I think there's only 4 of them. Yeah, I can kind of narrate them if you throw them up.
Yeah, I'll throw them up.
I
can get it started.
Next time I'll have a very much more slide-rich presentation. So yeah, I think this is a slide I made up on Google with their Google Document or Google Drawing.
Google Slides, I think they're called.
Yeah, Google Slides. I think I did it in Google Drawing and put it in Google Slides.
Nice.
And so that was just, I kind of had the word Planet PermaTrail, which is fine to put on there. It's kind of interesting. During the 60s, I heard NASA was prohibited from using the word planet.
Why?
Because they thought it would probably inculcate too much, overview effect, psychedelic hippie kind of speak, But it's interesting. In 1948, there was an astronomer named Fred Hoyle, and he said the most amazing product of the 20th century will be when someone takes a picture of the Earth from space. And that was to happen 20 years later in 1968, when Apollo 8, on their way to circle the moon, they aimed the camera out the window, and they also took that great Earthrise photo. They were coming around the moon, and that's something called the overview effect. That not every astronaut gets that, but it's a radical cognitive shift, in just recognizing the utter fragility and preciousness of this pale blue dot, this blue marble that we inhabit. We call it Earth, but it's mostly water, on the surface. We should really call it planet water. And
I think Earth was a goddess.
Yeah.
Earth was the goddess in either Greece or Rome.
Yeah, I love
it. It doesn't necessarily mean like soil, mineral, rock. That's what we tend to. We think when we think of earthly, we think of like solid, that kind of thing. But I think the name comes from some goddess. But anyway.
Yeah. I guess I'm being a little. So yeah, that was I tried to just encapsulate most of the idea, in a brief kind of elevator pitch description. One way to get the overview effect, I think, is with sundials. Actually, there's a great movement of people that build all different kinds of sundials around the planet, and I was thinking that could be sort of the top of your time capsule would be a sundial, and your time capsule could actually be open source radio enabled, where you could read and write, or at least read the sundial, read the time capsule. Like a little free library. The little free library movement is usually done with books, but it'd be a cool idea. Like you can get these little weatherproof thumb drives.
Neat.
Yeah, and these are actually you could like stick one under your mailbox with a magnet, and let your neighbor know, hey, I got this thing that talks about Neighborocracy and Permaculture. There's all kinds of free, books in the Creative Commons movement. So I forgot what slide was next. If you want to, okay, that's a logo idea that is not necessarily finished, but it's kind of the working one I'm using. And there's the symbol for human rights, the little bird hand graphical icon, which I think they're trying to make that a brand for people that are involved in human rights, or humane rights, as I like to say. We're due for an upgrade. Let's put that E in. Let's put that silent E on the end. Maybe those silent E letters are not so worthless.
On to the next one here.
Who is this man?
This I'm proud to say is an ancestor of mine named Jens Twedt. The way I spell my name now with a W was actually spelled with a V back then, and that's a bust of him that's outside of the library in Stavanger, Norway. I'm half Norwegian, and Norway is such a amazing country as far as things they're doing. Like they have mostly their cars are electric. They've gotten rid of the word race from their legal system. They say they just replaced it with unfair discrimination, which I think was a great idea, because race is really not even a legitimate, scientific category. I mean, I understand that there's been a lot of things perpetrated in the name of race, but anyway, if we just got to unfair discrimination, I think it would, because I think there's a lot of ageism that's unacknowledged too, and okay boomerism,
Right. Right.
So anyway, that's Jens Twedt, and he actually wrote one of his novels was called Deep Soil, and another thing I'm kind of using for the PermaTrail project is the Soil Your Undies movement. You take a pair of cotton underwear and bury them for 60 days, and then dig them up and see how much of the cotton underwear is eaten away. Of course, the waistband is not natural fiber, but this is called the Soil Your Undies movement. I think it's the Soil Conservation Council of Canada was doing a big thing of it. So I actually want to, as part of the PermaTrail project, I'd like to get an assay of soil diversity and combine that with GIS data as a way of, figuring out how much we've destroyed, the soil microbiota, because the stuff that gets sprayed like Roundup is just terrible for soil bacteria. I mean, it just hammers it. And really, that's what grows the food, is the health of the soil. Even trees communicate with microbiota and fungi, and they actually send out aid packages to other trees, through this communication network.
Yeah, it's very true. The soil is remarkably important, and modern day agricultural practices are absolutely destroying it. Specifically, not merely Monsanto's glyphosate and Roundup, but a multitude of other things. Just our practices, monoculture, monoagriculture, that kind of thing. Development of suburbs and just whatever condos. You tear off the topsoil, you remove it, you destroy. Literally. So here's a little fun little permaculture fact for you. If you take 1 teaspoon of healthy soil with humus or loam or something like that, you're going to have about 1 billion different microbes in that 1 teaspoon. And then there's all sorts of relationships, configurations between each microbe and all the other ones. The number is actually 5 times 10 to the 17th power. That's how many different relationships are going on within 1 tablespoon of healthy topsoil. You remove all that. And the reason for that is because nature knows how to grow things better than we do. And that's the amount of it takes in order to produce very healthy forests, prairies, etc., ecosystems. So when you start destroying that, you start just wiping out, like you said, the microbes are the ones that really are doing all the work. I mean, obviously photosynthesis is extremely important. Water is extremely important. We get that. The microbes are the ones that are making the plant, taking all that and giving it to the plant and making it grow. And without it, you're done. You're done.
Yeah, and they're sequestering carbon too.
And they sequester carbon massively. Yes. Good point.
Wow.
And in fact, put in a good word for biochar, which is pyrolyzed cellulose and other biomass. If you you heat it in the presence of in the absence of oxygen, and you get this charcoal kind of material. And actually, a piece of biochar the size of a ping pong ball has the surface area of a tennis court. And it's a little, nooks and crannies and life rafts for these soil bacteria. So yeah, the biochar is going to be another very big link in the star in the PermaTrail constellation.
Yeah. So let me ask you this: I am currently reading a book, Bright Green something. I can't remember the last name, but it's 2 authors, Derek somebody and somebody else. And they're basically Bright Green what?
Bright Green Futures. I think I've heard of that. Maybe it's a different one.
I'll look it up on my phone. Basically, what they're saying is that there's no such thing as a green technology. The technology is, you kind of alluded to something about it earlier when you were talking about Bright Green lies, Lies, that basically the environmental movement, with all its optimism concerning green technology, is full of it. That is, there's no such thing. Even if you take nuclear energy off the table, solar, wind, hydro, these all come from just the manufacturing of these sorts of things are going to need all sorts of things that are the exact opposite of what they're trying to reduce in the first place. Does that make sense? There's a whole supply chain logistics.
That's also called greenwashing. These little token attempts to get some feel good kinds of. Hey, look at our brand. We're okay. We're doing little token attempts that are designed to make you feel good.
They bring up they use a lot of examples from Germany, because Germany right now is considered to be amongst all the politicians and economists and stuff like that, the leader in eco technology and the way forward and progress and that kind of thing. What we're not hearing is about how they use biofuel, biomass, and they're actually cutting down forests to use large areas of land to grow one crop in order to turn that into a fuel source to run their cars, their trucks, turbines, whatever else. And that the electricity that usually when you're hearing the statistics for how progressive Germany is being, they're talking about we're now 70% alternative fuels to fuel all the electricity. But the electricity only counts for less than 30% of the energy produced in the country. So it's actually a much lower number of alternative advantages going on with alternative fuel. So we're not getting the full story in the main media for sure. Permaculture,
sounds a little bit like Planet of the Humans. I had some of that greenwash stuff going on.
Right. My point being is that permaculture is a remarkable true alternative to all of this nonsense going on or being espoused and proposed right now, including and especially green technology. Permaculture is a set of methods, a massive set of methods that is use what is called a closed loop system. So you build basically a garden that sustains itself. From the rainwater collected, that kind of thing, you put into the garden to to grow the plants, the food, and everything else. You need very little, if anything else, outside of that system itself in order for that system to flourish. And that's a very healthy way of approaching growing things, for sure, because it's 100% self-sustainable.
And it grows people too. It's actually a design system you can apply to anything. I love that there's like 12 permaculture design ethics. I can't observe and interact.
Oh, you want me to get them right now?
Yeah. If you could, do you have those handy? Because I was thinking I want to make like a clock that has those for each hour, and then a calendar. 12 months, 12 principles.
Interesting.
All right, here they are. You ready?
Yeah.
I'll read it real quick. Where are they? Hold on. No, I just lost it.
These are David Holmgren's.
Observe and interact, catch and store energy, obtain a yield, apply self-regulation and feedback, use and value renewables, produce no waste, design from patterns to details, integrate, don't segregate. And that's where the list ends, even though there's probably a couple more.
Yeah.
And there are 3 main ethics of permaculture as well, which is people care, fair share, and earth care.
Right.
But,
people, planet, triple bottom line.
Yeah, exactly.
It's also
permaculture is remarkably powerful stuff. It really hugoculture. Yeah. So speaking of indigenous people, and it's not merely limited to the Americas. Hugoculture is something that comes from like the old school ancient Norse traditions of using wood, leaves, stuff like those, stuff on the forest floor in order to generate nutrients for your garden. So like hay bale, or I'm sorry, not hay bale. Don't ever use hay. Straw bale gardening is a big thing. I've done it before myself with great success. So you take a straw bale, you wet it down every day for like 2 weeks straight, and then you dig out a little, some holes in it or not. Put a little bit of soil in there, and you start planting. And all of a sudden, the nitrogen from the straw itself helps the soil create all sorts of nutrients within it, and your plants just grow huge. It's really quite awesome. And then at the end of the year, you can take the straw bale, take it apart, and put that straw on top of like your other garden areas, and it'll go into the soil itself and create an even greater, stronger microbial web for next year. No, it's fantastic stuff. Yeah, it's awesome. And there's absolutely no waste. Everything was being used.
Yeah. There's a few of the permaculture principles being used there, and we've got a guy in the Conejo Valley Makers who's actually used like Raspberry Pis and stuff to basically automate his whole household garden system. So I think a lot of people are turned off by growing food because it's like, oh, I got to like so much work, I got to remember to water stuff, but there's like FarmBot that does this like XY plotter kind of thing with getting rid of the weeds and doing the watering. So I just got one of those Aero Garden systems. I actually was able to use my EBT food stamps to order it off. It was a little overpriced, but I'm a low income kind of person, so I'm getting the food aid thing. Maybe I should be more ashamed to admit that, but I think maybe not. The government has screwed up the economy enough that
you're fine.
I consider it like a economic remediation plan. But
right.
Actually we're going to have a booth at the Rotary Club Street Fair in a few weeks here, and every year they do an annual street fair, and someone in the Conejo Valley Makers who have a booth was kind enough to donate $100 for me to have a booth next door. So I'll have my Dan Tweed for City Council booth. I don't think I'm allowed to sell stuff, but I'm probably just going to be giving away, ideas and accepting donations. And
was there anything else in this presentation? Was there another?
Oh well,
or did you have more on?
Because his son ended up jumping a line about his age to get in the Norwegian Merchant Marine and make it to America to be able to give birth to my father. And so anyway, I just feel like there's kind of a cool, honoring the ancestors kind of aspect to PermaTrail. And I think Norway is going to be a huge global player. I mean, they've got this Svalbard seed vault, which I think has like all the seeds they can find in there. So yeah, maybe there's another slide I can talk about if you want to. Okay, so Earth Day was when Earth Day hit in 1970. I was 9 years old, and you can tell I was thinking about Earth Day stuff back then. This is a little plaster of Paris craft and we lived in Manhattan Beach, and Live Oak Park had a rec center, and one of the things they said, hey, make something out of plaster. They wanted you to cast these pre-made little things. And I'm going to freeform it and make a little ecology symbol here. So there's 9-year-old Dan Tweed with his. He was an ecologist.
There you go.
Back then.
Born to do it.
What's the next slide there? Okay, now there's the magazine that actually proposed in 2002. That's the October 2002 issue of Outside Magazine. And for their 25th anniversary, they had a section called The Next Big Challenges for the Next 25 Years. And one of them, you can't really see it there, but it was hiking the Round the World Trail. They called it the Phineas Fogg Slog. If you remember, Round the World in 80 Days, Phineas Fogg was one of the Round the World characters. So, they had a write-up about it. And that might have been where I heard about it on the radio with them as the source. So that was definitely one genesis point for the idea of a global trail. And then they didn't have the permaculture part, but maybe they'll come around. So I actually ordered a copy of that, and I can't find it right now. But I tried to get the content online, but it wasn't accessible. Was that the last picture? I think in the.
Looks like it, yeah.
Yeah, I had other ones, so I didn't get them in time. But well, anyway, thanks for running through those.
My pleasure.
If you have me back, I'll have a more detailed slideshow at some point.
Real quick, I want to give a shout out to Molly Mae Brady. Molly, thanks for tuning in. She's been tuning in for consistent several weeks now, if not more. So thanks for showing up here. And do you like that, Molly? That I put that up there for you. We'll talk about that later. Anyway.
Go Earth spirituality.
What's right, Aleister Crowley?
There's a connection there between permaculture and Earth spirituality that deserves.
Oh, Earth spirituality. So you said Aleister Crowley. He
was into permaculture too, but he kept it a secret.
Yeah, exactly. There's a huge connection between. Well, you get into biodynamics, and that's where the spiritual side of it comes in. Again, initiated by Rudolf Steiner, who's considered to be one of probably the last polymath ever. And if people don't know what polymath means, it means like a genius in a multitude of different areas, from mathematics and sciences to literature to whatever. I mean, he actually invented the Waldorf School, which is a very, very interesting curriculum for kids to learn by. And I've had friends send their kids there and said that there's nothing like it. It's just an unbelievable set of methods for learning. Rudolf Steiner is an amazing human being. He was an occultist. He literally was an occultist. And that's where the spirituality ties into things like permaculture and what you're doing. Very interesting stuff for sure. We only got like a minute and a half left. Dan, do you want anything you want to plug real quick? Anything up and comings, or tell people how they can get in touch with you or get involved in the PermaTrail project?
Yeah, right now permatrail.org will point you to one of the Facebook groups. I think I have a page and a group. I'm not sure which one it points to, but I'm going to be tomorrow on the World Talent Economy Forum. We're going to be talking about brain-like computing. So Sharif in Malaysia always chooses these great topics. He's had like 350 shows, and we have a great. I'm proud. I like
that. That's really interesting. Like just algorithmic reasoning in the brain, that kind of thing.
Yeah. We've got some great transhumanist party expert kind of folk on there that. I think Sharif is the ambassador, or the Malaysian ambassador for the U.S. Transhumanist Party. And I kind of ran under their platform because it's like the most science-based, logical, progressive platform out there right now, I think. But yeah, I really, you guys are great.
Yeah, that was fun.
What was the community college that had the permaculture design course, by the way?
It's a hell of a commute for you. It's in Lake County, Illinois. It's called College of Lake County, but it had a year-long curriculum for certification in horticulture, and it has an arborist and landscaping design and construction, all sorts of different things. But our teacher, Karen Wentz, who was a part of the horticulture program, horticulture program. Permaculture is her thing, and she's the one that really sort of pushed that through, made sure that we got the things done that we needed to get done. So we had 2 certifications instead of 1 at the end. It is 8:00. Calvin, do you have any last Words.
Nope. This was cool. This was
Very
topic
interesting
I didn't
stuff.
know much about, so I was just soaking it in like a sponge. I have more questions. I want to go.
Oh, yeah.
I want to go another hour at least. But it was a
I
real.
left out a lot of stuff actually.
Yeah, no, there's a lot to talk about here for sure. And so let's make sure we get you back on the show and talk about some more stuff.
That'd be great.
I feel like we just barely scratched the surface of what permaculture is and what it can do to help a lot of different things. So thank you for tuning in tonight, everybody, to the Illinois Green Party series. I'm your host, David Rich, with your co-host. I don't know, can I do that? Oh, that hurts me. With my co-host Calvin Tomashko, our guest Evan Tweed of PermaTrail Project or PermaTrail.org, currently known as. Check it out. Thank you very much for tuning in. Until next time, be good, be green.